Few people talk about it, but there's a profound quiet that settles in on the last night before an elderly person passes away. It's not like the movies or the stories you hear. It's a transition that begins hours beforehand, at a moment when the body no longer responds with the same strength, and the mind begins to alternate between memories and presences that the living can't perceive. Many older folks report seeing loved ones who have already departed, even with their eyes closed, as if they're being called back to a familiar place. This process, described by those who've been close to the end, is less about pain and more about saying goodbye. A farewell that happens from the inside out, in silence without fanfare. And, according to Edgar Cayce, what happens on that last night has a much greater significance than we imagine. He believed that, at that instant, the spirit already begins to move out of the body, initiating a journey that few fully understand. While the body rests, there's a kind of invisible organization happening around. Cayce described this as a spiritual preparation, in which departed entities approach not to frighten, but to guide. It's as if a bridge is being built between two worlds. That's why many seniors in this phase demonstrate unexpected serenity, even in the face of difficult diagnoses. According to the accounts analyzed by Cayce, the last dreams or even the last silences may contain clear signs that something is being understood on a more subtle plane. If this subject touches you in any way, if you know someone who has lived or is living something like this, please consider subscribing and leaving your support for this video. Your gesture helps more people find these important reflections at a delicate moment in life. What Cayce revealed, based on his visions and accounts received in a trance state, is that the soul of an elderly person begins to detach gradually. Unlike what many think, death doesn't happen in a second. There's an internal process that can last hours, even days, in which consciousness alternates between two states. Some seniors report that they begin to hear soft voices, feel comforting presences, or visualize landscapes they have never seen before. Medicine often explains these experiences as hallucinations caused by a declining brain, but Cayce believed that this was the soul's first contact with a higher dimension. He said that the last night is like a journey in slow motion, where the spirit begins to recall its true origin long before physical birth. There is a specific moment described by him when the body begins to lose energetic density. This means that the soul stops identifying with the pains, the limitations, and even the attachments. Cayce called this untying earthly threads. That's why many seniors stop talking, even when conscious, as if they no longer need to use words. They enter a state of deep contemplation, where their eyes fix on points in the room or seem to follow something invisible. Family members notice subtle changes, a slight smile, a calmer breath, a tear that rolls down without sadness. According to Cayce, this indicates that the spirit is already adapting to the new vibration, even if the body is still here. The soul, at that instant, begins to understand that it is not alone. This understanding brings peace, not a forced or artificial peace, but a calm that comes from within, as if everything finally makes sense. Cayce affirmed that the soul of the elderly person, when detaching from the body, is received by familiar and benevolent beings. In his visions, he saw people being welcomed by mothers, fathers, siblings, and even pets who had already passed on. This reunion, according to him, is not just symbolic, it's real, experienced with the same intensity as the most vivid memories. This helps to explain why so many seniors smile in their final minutes, even without apparent reason. For them, the end of life is not an end, but a return. And this perception, even if silent, profoundly transforms what we call death. The truth is that most people only understand the value of the last night when it has already passed. Cayce warned that we should pay more attention to these moments, as they are full of wisdom. An elderly person, even in silence, may be living their most lucid moment. It is when the masks fall, the fears dissolve, and the soul shows itself as it really is. Those who closely follow this process need sensitivity to realize that there is something much bigger happening there. A cycle is closing, but another is opening at the same time, and that is precisely why this last night, far from being just the end of everything, can be the truest moment of an entire existence. Cayce used to say that we shouldn't cling to the idea of death as loss. For him, it was more appropriate to think in terms of continuity. An elderly person, when approaching the end, often mentally relives significant moments in life. This doesn't happen by chance. According to Cayce, it's as if the soul is organizing its own baggage before departure. These memories emerge with clarity, sometimes even with details forgotten for decades, because consciousness is seeking to understand the meaning of everything that has been lived. It's not uncommon for seniors to mention old events with renewed emotion, as if they were reviewing their path to accept and release what still weighs them down. This review for Cayce is one of the most important steps in the transition, as it is the moment when the soul prepares to cross over without guilt or regret. In this process, something remarkable can happen. People who have spent their entire lives fearing death suddenly become more tranquil. Cayce said that this occurs because the soul, feeling the approach of change, begins to access a wisdom that is beyond rational understanding. Many seniors begin to have deep internal conversations, even without verbalizing them. Others seem to enter a state of listening, as if they are capturing messages that do not come from the physical environment. What is impressive is that these accounts are repeated with similar patterns in different cultures and eras. This shows that there is something universal in the experience of death. And perhaps that is why Cayce insisted so much that we should not ignore the signs of the last night, as it contains answers that science cannot yet explain. In the eyes of the family, these moments may seem confusing. An elderly person who begins to talk to someone invisible or who smiles at the ceiling can frighten those who observe. But Cayce asked that we not interpret this as delirium. For him, it's a sign that the soul is already in contact with another reality. He described these moments as rehearsals for the soul, rehearsals for the great reunion. There is a natural wisdom in this process. The body knows it will stop, the soul knows it will continue. And between these two knowledges, there is a sacred interval, which is precisely this last night. Therefore, it is important that those who are around avoid interrupting, questioning, or correcting the elderly person in these moments. More valuable than trying to understand what they see or hear is ensuring that they feel respect, presence, and calm around them. Cayce also pointed out that even in cases of apparently quick deaths, such as during sleep, the soul had already been preparing silently in the previous days. Many seniors who pass away peacefully had already changed their behavior. Some say goodbye to friends, others arrange documents, write letters, donate objects. Most of these attitudes are seen as coincidence, but for Cayce they are unconscious manifestations of those who know, deep down, that they are closing a cycle. This reinforces the idea that the soul is not caught by surprise. It feels, perceives, and acts according to this intuition. Thus, the last night doesn't begin only when the body weakens. It is built little by little, between simple and silent gestures, full of meaning. Each detail can be a message about what is about to happen. An important observation made by Cayce is that the soul is never alone on this journey. Even when the person is apparently isolated, they are accompanied by presences that escape common perception. He described these spiritual companions as beings who have affinity with the journey of that soul. They can be family members, friends, or even consciences that act specifically to help at the moment of passage. This invisible network of support is something that, according to Cayce, ensures that no one crosses the threshold of death in abandonment. The feeling of welcome is so strong that often the elderly person loses the fear of the unknown. The feeling of loneliness, so common in old age, disappears at this moment, replaced by something that resembles a reunion awaited for a long time. This reunion is described as one of the most impactful moments of the afterlife experience. Cayce reported that as soon as the soul detaches completely from the body, it crosses a kind of clearing of light, where it encounters known figures and also understands forgotten lessons. Everything that seemed meaningless during life begins to gain coherence. The pains, the losses, even the mistakes begin to be seen from a new perspective. The soul understands that everything was part of a greater learning. This understanding brings a peace very different from resignation. It's an active peace full of clarity, and it is this state that Cayce said is the true beginning of spiritual life. An elderly person, when going through this, does not disappear. They return to a form of existence that has always been present, but that now becomes visible and conscious. Most people believe that consciousness ends when the body stops, but Cayce's visions show the opposite. For him, consciousness expands. It ceases to be trapped by physical limitations and begins to move freely. Many accounts of near-death experiences reinforce this idea. People accurately describe what happened around their body, even while being clinically dead. Cayce said, this happens because the soul, at that instant, is already operating on another plane. That's why even after physical death, the elderly person can still observe, understand, and feel the environment around them for a while. They see their family members, perceive their emotions, and often try to communicate something before going on their way. This is not always noticed by the living, but it's real for those departing. This transition stage, according to Cayce, is marked by a kind of expanded review of one's own life. The soul, now out of the body, revisits its most important moments, but also the more subtle ones. The focus is not only on the great achievements or failures, but on the intentions behind each choice. The way others were treated, the times one helped in silence, the unspoken feelings, all of this is reviewed with a clarity impossible during earthly life. Cayce believed that this review is not a judgment, but an opportunity for deep understanding. The soul sees its actions honestly, without excuses or masks, and in doing so, it grows. This growth doesn't depend on age, how much one knows, or how many books one has read. It depends on the willingness to understand one's own path. During this review, the soul is also welcomed and guided. Cayce mentioned that there are spiritual guides designated for this role. They don't impose anything, they just show. They reveal paths, help interpret choices, and offer serenity so that the soul doesn't get lost in guilt or fear. Many seniors in their last days demonstrate a spiritual lucidity that surprises even those who have lived with them their entire lives. They say profound phrases, reflect on the meaning of life, or say goodbye with a calmness that doesn't match the seriousness of the situation. This happens, according to Cayce, because the soul is already under the effect of this higher guidance. Even without realizing it, the elderly person begins to be led to a state of greater understanding and acceptance. These final moments also reveal something essential about forgiveness. Cayce said that, at the time of death, the soul seeks to resolve internal issues. That's why it's not uncommon for seniors to express a desire to talk to people from the past, apologize, or accept forgiveness that previously seemed impossible. This is not weakness, it's preparation. The soul, feeling that it's going to travel on, wants to leave lighter. Those who understand this avoid judgments and offer space for this emotional settlement to happen. Sometimes, a simple act of listening can be the greatest gift you offer someone at this time. Cayce reinforced that forgiveness is a safe bridge between this life and the next, and the more sincere this surrender is, the smoother the transition process will be for the departing soul. Another important characteristic described by Cayce is the change in the perception of time. In the final moments, the soul no longer follows the human clock. It begins to experience time in an expanded way. Minutes may seem like hours, and memories from decades ago come back with full force. The elderly person, even without saying anything, may be living complete scenes within themselves. That's why the silence of a dying person often hides a great inner movement. For Cayce, this expanded time allows the soul to detach calmly at its own pace. Forcing a quick farewell or interrupting these moments can cause restlessness. The ideal, according to him, is to allow spiritual time to happen as it should, even if everything seems still on the outside. And when the moment of total separation finally arrives, there is no sound, no bright lights, no screams. There is just a gentle shift. Cayce said that the soul leaves the body as one takes off old clothes naturally. The body may show clear physical signs, but the soul is already distant, at peace. Those who are nearby often feel a change in the air, a calm that takes over the environment. This is the indication that the crossing has been made. And, unlike what many think, there is no suffering at that instant. there is liberation. Cayce compared this moment to birth in reverse. Just as a baby enters the world with support, warmth, and presence, the soul of the elderly person departs also welcomed, guided, and supported by forces that know exactly what to do. Understanding this process completely changes the way we see aging and death. Cayce said that if everyone knew what really happens on the last night of an elderly person, they would have less fear of death and more respect for life. He stated that this moment is one of the most sacred of existence because it is when the soul reveals itself completely. The body may be fragile, the senses may fail, but consciousness is more awake than ever. It is in this phase that the truth about who we were and where we are going begins to become clear. Therefore, accompanying an elderly person in their final moments requires more than just physical care. It requires true presence, sensitivity, and understanding that there, before us, something deep and grand is happening. It's natural to feel pain when seeing someone leave. The physical absence weighs heavily, especially when it comes to someone who has guided us, cared for us, or shared life with us for so many years. But Cayce taught that the best way to honor those who depart is to respect this moment with love and gratitude. Avoid despair, calm the mind, and if possible, offer simple and sincere words. A thank you, a I'm here, a you are at peace. Small phrases that act as bridges between worlds. Often an elderly person about to die just needs to know that everything is okay so that they can move on without fear. Knowing this helps those who remain to transform grief into a more serene feeling, understanding that departure is, in fact, a new form of presence, more subtle but still real. After the departure, Cayce said that the bond with those we love is not broken. It only changes form. The soul that has departed remains accessible, especially in moments when we think fondly, when we feel longing, or when we remember something lived together. Many seniors before dying say that they will return to visit those they love. And in fact, many family members report feeling presences, vivid dreams, or unexpected signs that bring comfort. These accounts for Cayce were not illusions. They were real manifestations of the continuity of the bond between souls. This means that, even after the last night, the story between those who love each other continues, not as before, but as a silent presence that accompanies, protects, and guides, even if the eyes cannot see. The impact of this goes beyond individual experience. When we understand what happens on that last night, we also change the way we care for our seniors in life. We begin to listen more carefully, value their words and respect their silences. We understand that each gesture can carry a wisdom accumulated over decades. Cayce said that every elderly soul holds a piece of the path of humanity, and that taking good care of those who are near the end is a way of honoring the collective journey of us all. Therefore, reflecting on this topic is not just a spiritual exercise, but also a gesture of humanity. A reminder that every life matters until the last breath and that there is beauty even in the act of departing. Cayce didn't want us to be afraid of death, but rather to have respect for the mystery it represents. He said that dying is just crossing a door and that everyone one day will go through it. But when we understand what happens on the other side, this door ceases to be scary. It becomes just a passage to something that, deep down, has always belonged to us. By listening to and welcoming the accounts of those who have been close to death, such as the elderly, we have the chance to learn from those who have already walked almost everything. And so, instead of fearing the last night, we can prepare for it with more awareness, more serenity, and more confidence. Knowing this can transform not only the end of life, but the whole way we choose to live it while we are still here. If you've made it this far, it's because this topic touched something important within you. Maybe you remembered someone dear, maybe you're seeking answers, or just wanting to understand more about this moment that, one day, we will all face. If you felt that this video brought clarity, comfort, or a new vision, please consider sharing it with someone who may also benefit from this reflection. And if you want to follow other content like this, subscribe to the channel. Together, we can continue to bring light to topics that deserve to be treated with respect, sensitivity, and truth. Because in the end, that's what we all seek: understanding, welcome, and the certainty that, Until the last instant, life still has something to teach us.